God has specifically chosen you to be here at this time and in this place. You have incredible potential, purpose, and calling to push back the darkness and be a light for Christ. Stand for nothing and you'll fall for anything. It's time to stand your ground. This is Unapologetic. Hey everyone, welcome to Unapologetic. I'm super excited because today I'm interviewing Kait Warman. She is the founder of The Heart of Dating. She has an incredible ministry to encourage singles who are in the dating stage of life, and she's just so full of wisdom. She has great social media, just encouragement and biblical wisdom around the topic of dating, and I've wanted to talk to her for a long time, so I'm really excited that we have her on today. I truly believe that next to becoming a Christian, who you date, who you marry shapes your life more than anything. And so we're going to talk about very practical ways to date biblically and in a healthy way, and also how to break up. I love talking about breaking up. I'm pretty sure God moves just as much during breakups as he does in people he pairs us with. So I am excited to welcome Kait to the show. Kait, thank you for being here.
Hey, Julia. I'm so excited to be here. I love the pink that you're wearing today, by the way, my favorite color. And I'm so excited to dive in and talk about dating.
Yes, it's almost as if I knew the subject, so I decided to wear pink.
Yeah,
But
perfect.
I'm so excited to have you on. I'm going to start this show just asking the question we're asking for this season. What, in your expertise, with your experience, what do you wish people knew about relationships?
I love this question, and I'm not married, so I don't have the same expertise that somebody who's married might have. But I will say that I am a dating coach because of a lot of my extensive history of dating and how much God has used that to bring me to where I am today. And so what I'll say is this, that no dating story is exactly the same. Every story, God writes a different love story for every person. And I
Mhm.
find a lot of people are comparing their journey to other people's journeys. And so I would encourage people, especially in dating, to just be open to God doing what God wants to do and your story. It's not going to look exactly like this person's or that leader's story. And in fact, my story I know isn't going to be perfect, crystal clean. Everyone thinks just because I'm a dating coach, I'm going to do every single thing right. And I'm like, y'all, I'm still a human. I need Jesus. So we have to remember that every person's love story is very unique, and to really just keep it to you and your partner and to a few close people who are speaking into your life, and to keep on that lane with God at the center. So that's what I would say, Julia.
Okay, so we're just gonna jump right in then. As a dating coach, you're used to just being very straightforward.
Yes.
How do you think we fight that shame whenever we hear a great story or we
Mm.
watch The Notebook for the 15th time? And
Yes.
I mean, how do people fight or resist feeling shame about their story or about maybe what has or hasn't happened?
It's a real thing, and I'm gonna just speak from experience because I struggle with this a lot. I've been doing date coaching, I've been doing Heart of Dating for 4 years, and I'm not married at this time, right? And so but in those 4 years, I have dated, and I know a lot of the things in my head, right? I can preach it, I can be encouraging to people, I can share my advice, and yet still practically there are hard things for me to still practically do in relationships because of my history, because of the trauma and past relationships, because of just complications of who I am and how I love and how I've learned love and continue to relearn it. And a lot of the things we may know then change when we actually have to practice it. You know, you can study how to do something all day long, but you don't want a doctor that's just studied. You want a doctor who's actually practiced and who is actually good at his craft. And a lot of people may know a lot of the healing jargon, but they haven't actually practiced it when it comes into relationships and dating. And that's why people say when you start dating, a whole lot of things sometimes get brought to the surface. And so you may think, I'm in this great, amazing place. And then you date and you're like, whoa, I didn't realize that was there. or that was there and I got to deal with this. And a lot of that I just like to say is normal. And so those are the things you don't often see when somebody's sharing their beautiful story on Instagram. You know, you don't see the behind the scenes of some of the different love languages or the different love attachment styles that impact their
Mhm.
communication.
Yeah.
You don't see some of their conflict. And I'm pretty sure most of those things all do exist. But you have to realize that every person's story is so unique. Every person's background is so unique. So it'd be unfair for me to compare my life and my story and my dating situation to somebody who does not have abuse and trauma in their background,
Yeah.
who doesn't have brokenness in their family upbringing. It would be unfair
Mhm.
for me to compare my story with this girl who didn't have any of that, who's just like happy and joyous all the time. Like, she's going to potentially be different in a dating relationship, maybe not have as many triggers, maybe not
Mhm.
have as many trust problems with trust, and that's okay. That's her
Yeah.
story. My story is different. And so we really have to consider ourselves, where how God is using us, and consistently be committed to growth. That's what you have
Yeah.
to do. Are you consistently committed to growth? Is the person that you are with consistently committed to growth? And do the people, very core, not everybody, core people around you, you know, like 7 core people plus maybe a therapist, do they support your relationship? What do they think? They should have eyes into your relationship, and they should also be saying like, "Hey, I'm seeing this and there are hard moments, but this is good. You guys are fighting for God, you're fighting for one another, you're fighting to figure each other out, and you're ultimately becoming more sanctified in the process." So, it's okay if this doesn't look like Susie Q over here, you know? And so I'm such a big proponent of that, Julia, because I've had to personally fight for my own confidence in my own dating journey, even as a dating coach.
Yeah. That's great. And I think we've talked offline about this. Kate and I are coming kind of from the same lingo. But if you're just tuning in and you're like, what do you mean your trauma comes into dating? Just to say a little bit about that, anything that hasn't been healed in your own life, you're continually trying to work out. You're trying
Mhm.
to solve, you're trying to heal with someone that you could have just met a week ago. And so
Yeah.
that's what Kate's kind of talking about is that unless there's healing in your own life, like your brain, your heart, your spirit needs to heal. And so you keep acting out, you keep replaying or trying to create the same situation because you're trying to come full circle. You're trying to make sure that whatever that relationship is that was difficult gets fixed, which is
Mm.
interesting. It's interesting that we do that, but a lot of people don't know that. They don't realize maybe until it's too late or they've
Yeah.
ruined another relationship. And
Yeah.
just to say, that's not, I know that you're coming from the same place. Like, that's not necessarily your fault. Like, that can
Mm.
be because of something that was done to you or something that you experience. But the fact of the matter is, you keep replaying, you keep trying to heal that. So, do you have some pointers for how people can know if they're trying, if they're still stuck or if they are in a healthy place?
It's so hard. Like the healing journey for me is for me personally and for what I share with people, it's not linear. And, you know, you don't just reach a level of perfect healing and then you never have to revisit anything ever again. I just don't believe that. I believe you reach a good solid level, you have more tools, but then something may happen that brings up something that you didn't even know still kind of existed or was under the layer. And then you go down a little bit in the journey. You were up here, you go down a little bit,
Yeah.
but you have better tools to deal with it this time. So you're not plummeting to the bottom. You're just going, it's a little dip. And you're like, okay, what tool do I need to sharpen? What maybe do I have to add to my toolkit here
Yeah.
to get back to where I was before? And that's to me the picture of healing. I think there's a big curve at the beginning, especially if you start recognizing that there's more trauma in your background, or just it doesn't even have to just be big T trauma moments. It could be a lot of small little T trauma moments that, you know, you may not think, you may be listening and be like, well, I had a great upbringing, I had a great Christian parents, you know, I had pretty good friends. Like, I'm fine, right? And you still may have trauma in your background. It just may be smaller T moments, smaller trauma moments that have compiled over time, that have led to thought processes about yourself, that have led to you not trusting yourself or others. And so there might be smaller T moments that still lead to things that have compounded into belief systems that need to be worked through. So just because it's not maybe some of my story, which includes abuse and brokenness in childhood and a slew of things that I could go into a whole another episode about, just because it's not those big T things, you still may have some things that you need to work through. And so,
Mhm.
um, but back to your question, I would say be if you have recognized that there are things that are coming up for you, that there's patterns in your life that keep repeating, this is an awesome opportunity to not shame yourself, but to get curious, to say, okay, I go on a date with this guy and I'm constantly finding myself anxious. Every time I go out with a guy, I'm so anxious. I'm questioning myself. I'm checking my phone every 5 seconds. Did he text me? Like I'm overthinking what I did or should have done. And if that's you on every date, then there's something there in that anxiety and how you're attaching with men that needs to be looked at. It needs to have a you need to take a deeper dive. And
Mm.
that's just an indicator for maybe something or some things that have happened that you can start getting to the root of. So you start healing, you start processing. Why do I have anxiety? Why do I have potentially anxious attachment? Which goes back to attachment theory. It's how we attach and love. And you start going through those layers. And let's say you take some time to heal, and you're like, okay, whatever that is, and I'm not going to give you a time limit because it's different for every person,
Right.
but you take time to heal, and then you're like, okay, I kind of know this anxious thing. I'm used to it. I know what triggers me into anxiousness. I'm more aware of it. I have more tools. I'm going to get back out there and dating. You get back out there and dating, and maybe in the beginning, you're like, okay, I'm good. Like, I feel better in the anxiousness. But then you start continuing to date. You get into a more exclusive or serious relationship, and maybe a different layer of anxiety pops up this time that was different from the beginning layers of anxiety. That's not to say you're not necessarily healed or that you are on a journey. It's to say that you're on a journey of healing. And this is a moment to say, okay, I need more counseling. I need more healing here. I'm going to be honest with the person I'm dating, and I'm going to be fighting for continual healing and growth. So, Julia, I don't know if that was maybe the answer you're looking for, but that's just how I approach healing in my own life and what I encourage people to do. Because I truly don't believe there's like this perfect level of healing that we achieve, but there are seasons you should take off to focus on healing. And then as you date, I do believe that there's opportunities to just continue to fight for healing and sharper tools.
No, absolutely. That was wonderful. I think a lot of times we talk about theories, and that was so practical. I think another, we're talking about anxiety. Another thing is obviously conflict
Yeah.
and, how you react in conflict.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't think there's necessarily like, of course, spiritually, we would not say you're ever perfect in this life. But I think
Totally.
you get different degrees. And then we know if, say, that you're a certain level and you're able to, level sounds kind of weird, but you have been in a constant relationship or a healthy relationship, but then there is a pandemic or then there is a loss in your family.
Mm.
Everyone is prone to go back to whatever they use. I know you know this, but I
Yeah.
mean, that's a point where you have to really fight to stay at that level of health. So
Yes.
thinking like usually I don't, but people I think of that ghost
Mm.
and
Oh my God.
realizing that that's just something that you're prone to. And so if
Mhm.
there's something upsetting, realizing that's what you do. And just what we've talked about, everyone has stuff. Some
Yes.
people have just the trauma that you read about, and some people it's that covert shaming, which I found a lot in
Yeah.
Christian families
Mhm.
specifically, because so many, I mean, I know you know this, but I've been in student ministry for so long and as a therapist, and people will just come and say, well, I don't have any of that really bad stuff,
Mm. Yep.
and they just can't really point to what's wrong.
Yeah.
And so if you don't know what covert shaming is, that's where people just make you kind of think you don't exist or you don't matter,
Mhm.
and you can't really pinpoint it. Like, no one was
Yeah.
verbally abusive or physically, but it was those little messages that you got
Mm.
along the way and that
Yeah.
you took to heart and that influenced your personality. So,
Mm.
all of that to say, everyone, of course, doesn't have to be in therapy, but if you continue to have difficulty in dating,
Mm.
there's something, and just so you know, I mean, I know you know this, but anyone married listening knows it doesn't suddenly change when you're married. It's not like,
The
and
ring
now
on the
I'm
finger does
healed.
not magic it's not a magic disappear once
Yeah.
you say "I do," right? Everyone's like,
Yes.
"It'll all
Like,
go
and
away."
now
No,
all
no.
attachment issues and all triggers and everything's fine. So as much, as much as you can be healthy before getting married and figuring out as much stuff about yourself, the better. I want you just to give our listeners your best dating advice. What is
Yes.
your best dating advice?
Yeah, so it's gonna be a two-part thing, okay? Because the first thing, and where I see a lot of people need work on, especially Christian singles. Here's the thing with non-Christians, they date a lot. They go out there, they meet people, they don't take it as seriously. And there's an obvious disadvantage to not taking dating seriously. But what they are good at is they're good at talking to people. They're good at communicating to somebody of the opposite gender. They're comfortable with somebody. On the opposite end, with Christians, we put so much pressure on dating that we're really uncomfortable with dating. We're really uncomfortable talking to the opposite sex. We're just like, we clam up. We can't even show a guy we're interested. We can't flirt. Like, we can't do it's nothing. There's nothing. We're just like, did he notice
Like,
me? Is he
are
going
we
to ask
getting
me out?
married in a month?
Yeah. Yes, and that's the disadvantage because we're not dating. And when we do date, it becomes so serious so quickly, which I see there's so many issues with that. So the first thing is I want you to get comfortable with who you are. And this is I have people do this practice where you just have to think of we have these lists of what we're looking for in somebody else. And I always like to say that's fine to have a few things you're looking for. I always say just 5 need to have are the main things, and then you'll have more. But if you try to look for 20 things on the first date, it's just too much. And the person is going to feel that you're interviewing them and sizing them up to be your future husband. And nobody wants to feel that way. So, 5 things looking for someone else. But on the flip side, do you know what you bring to a relationship? Do you know what God has uniquely called you to? Do you know the unique things that make you you? This is very important so that we're not fighting as much comparison. We're not questioning our beauty and our body as much, which women really highly struggle with. Where we know, even if this person doesn't like me, even if this doesn't work out, I know that these things are true about me. I am solid in these things. I'm not trying to get this person to confirm that these things are true about me. I know because I worked it out with God. I prayed over these things. And this is who I uniquely am, which also means you're not going to be for everyone. And that's part of it. You don't need to be for everyone. Hopefully not. You only want to marry one person, right? And so write down a list of 10 things that you bring to a relationship. And if you have trouble doing this, you can bring in some close friends, phone a friend, ask a friend truly like, hey, I'm doing this exercise. This dating coach shared with me how to do this exercise on really finding more confidence in dating. So I'm curious, like, why are you friends with me? What do I bring to your life? What do you enjoy about being around me? Ask your close friends and write those 10 things. And I want you to pray over these things, ask God to confirm these things. And before you go on a date, I want you to look at the like read these things aloud. I am this, I am that, and like literally empower yourself, seal
That's
them
great.
in your mind and heart verbally, knowing they're true. So that's my first really strong piece of advice, but it goes in tandem with the second piece, which is just put yourself out there more. So many Christians were just like, oh, I don't know, and I can't find anyone. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the number one question I get is like, where are the good Christian men? How do I meet someone? And I'm like, you just got to put yourself out there more. You have to talk to more people. You have to ask for setups. You have to talk to the guy that you think is interesting at church. You need to just put yourself out there more.
Okay,
And
I gotta ask you something there. Okay, because I was just talking to this group of college and single girls last night, and they're like, I mean, I know everyone here, and I've heard this a lot. They're like,
yeah.
okay, I've gone to the singles ministry, scoped it out. No, this is not where my future husband is, so I'm switching churches.
Oh my
What do
God.
you say to that?
I'm like, scoped it out. Have you talked to all of them? What are you judging them on? Like, you don't know them yet. Like, unless you've talked to all of them and gotten to know them, you don't know them. A lot of people are judging it by like this collective air of like they're not cute enough, or there's something under there where I'm like, wait a second. What is it? Why is every single guy being classified the same way? And oh, that's so hard for me because I'm like, you need to be more open because that's why I say the 5 non-negotiables, because we make it so we put our preferences as non-negotiables. Our preference of how tall he is, if he's a worship artist, if he's the leader of the Bible study. We put all these preferences, how much money he makes, or, what his major is if you're in college. And those aren't the important things. The important things is the fruit of the Spirit in his life. The important things are the kinds of friendships he has and the godly friendships he's cultivating. The important thing is, does he have vision for his life? Is he excited about where he's going? And is he actively pursuing that? You can't really know those things unless you get to know someone. Like,
Okay,
you have
I have to ask you then. So many questions. So, I mean, how attractive or how attracted do you need to be to somebody? Because, I mean, there are people that have the fruit of the spirit and they are driven, but I've heard girls say, and I mean, I don't like them. So they're good on paper and my mom would love them, but I don't want to spend any time with them. So how much does attraction play in? How important is it?
Well, we first have to realize we're in a society where everything is driven by physicality and appearance. And so that just needs to be called out and recognized. Whether or not we think it's affecting us, it is affecting us. And we put attraction on a pedestal. And I do believe attraction is important. But we specifically, actually, I should clarify, we put physical attraction on a pedestal because I believe attraction is multifaceted. There's not just physical attraction, because when you grow into a relationship, and you would know this more, Julia, being married, it's not just about like how physically attracted I am to that person. It's how emotionally attracted to them you are. Like, do they make you feel safe? Can you have deep conversations? Do they care for your emotions? How spiritually you're attracted to them? Do they love God? Are you excited about the Jesus in them? Like,
Mm-hmm.
do you feel like your relationship is going somewhere spiritually? It's the intellectual. Are they interesting? Do they have interesting hobbies? Can you have interesting conversations with them? It's the friendship and personality attraction. Like, are you friends with them? Like, a friendship
Mm-hmm.
is a huge, amazing basis for a relationship. And so attraction is so multifaceted. We focus on that physical. And so I say this to girls and to guys, honestly, it definitely goes both ways. I'm like, if you can say to yourself, this person is objectively an attractive person. Like, I'm not that maybe attracted to him, but I find them to be objectively attractive. Like, they're an attractive human being. I just don't know if I want to kiss them or anything like that. And so I'm probably never going to go on a date with them. If you can at least say, they're objectively an attractive person and there's some curiosity behind how they lead their life. Maybe I have fun and in friendship with them. Maybe they make me feel safe, or they've asked me really good questions. If some of those other things are there, you should go on a date with them and see how potentially the other area, aka physical attraction, could
Mm-hmm.
potentially change over time. I practice this for myself, and it's been phenomenal how God has changed my physical attraction towards a man. Now, I'm not saying like it can't be zero. There can't be absolutely nothing. If there's absolutely nothing, I'm not telling you to like date and then get married to somebody you have zero attraction to physically.
Yeah,
That's
we
important.
don't get better looking as we get older. So,
Yeah, it's important. It's just not the most important. So
Right, right,
it should be after like their godly walk, their,
right.
the friendship capacity, the emotional, it should be after those things. That it's
Mhm.
important. It's just not the most important.
Right. That's great. That's great. Okay, so I'm definitely going to set you up for this. I just really want you to talk about breaking up and what that's like and how we can do that well. Can you speak to that? How can
Yeah.
we break up well? How can we heal?
Well,
What if we really do think we're with the right person?
It's so tough. I think breaking up well has a few facets. The first facet to breaking up well is to dating well. If you date well and you have solid boundaries and you're not dipping too much into these buckets that you shouldn't be dipping into yet, such as physicality and even spiritual connection, um, those things, you have to balance it well. So that's the first part about breaking up well, which we could talk way more about that. But, balancing the relationship well is a big part of being able to break up well. If you are making out with this person, if you are praying with them for hours and hours and hours on end, you're going to have some ties to them that are going to make the breakup really, really difficult. So, breaking up well first has to do with dating well. But when it comes to actually making the decision, should I break up with this person? How do I do it honorably? If you're that person wondering, how do I break up well? Or how do I break up and how do I do this in a good way as best as I can? First thing is don't make this decision in a silo and don't make it quickly. I see a lot of people and I've struggled with this. I have anxious attachment. I shared a little about that earlier and I struggled with anxious attachment, which means for me, I can sometimes go back and forth. I'm like, I can't be in this. This is horrible. Like I can and then I can the next day, no, I want to be with you, and that was the way my past was. And so very important to not make a rash decision on your breakup in the heat
That's
of a
good.
moment. This shouldn't be something that just happens. It should be, even if you feel it very clearly, something's off here, you need to process that. You need to process it with God, process it with your close people. If you have a counselor, process it with your counselor. Do not make the decision in a silo, especially if it's like more of a serious relationship. Okay. I'm not talking about if you went on 2 dates and you're breaking it off. That's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about you've been dating them for a while, okay?
Right.
And so don't make it in a silo. And then when you are doing the actual breakup, it's really important to just be clear and honest with the person. And I say, to not leave all these ties in open-endedness. Like I say for now, God can do so much. He might bring your past back together. He did that for you, Julia, right? And so, but I think some of the big mistake we make is to leave this door wide open. I just can't be with you. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe in a few months. You want to give that person the clarity to
Okay.
just continue to press into God and move forward. God may bring you back together, but close the door right now. Close the
Right.
door.
That's
And
good.
if the door reopens, then you can come back and say, "Hey, I made a mistake or this is what I learned. I know you've probably moved on, but I want to have a conversation. Are you open to that?" But I would say close the door. Clarity is kindness. Be clear, be kind. I always see breakups as an opportunity to leave someone better than you found them. If there's some clear reasons, like there's big sin in their life or sexual sin or something that is like just like drawing you guys apart, be honest with that person in a kind way. You're not doing them any justice by just sugarcoating it, being like, it's not you, it's me. I don't know. Just hopefully you're not saying that at
Just say,
all.
but really it's you and you should work on these things. No, I'm
Yeah.
just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Say like, I
Okay, I
really
need to
think,
ask you. I
yeah,
think
go ahead.
there's something that I see happen a lot, especially with Christian couples. So I'm gonna ask you two questions because I could
Uh-huh.
talk to you
Please
forever.
do.
Should you say when you're breaking up or when you're getting together that God told me to? God told me to break up with you. God told me we should date. I've got about a
No,
million
no.
funny stories around all this, but you
I
should don't blame God.
I wouldn't bring God into this. Even, I think we like to spiritually scapegoat like a lot. We're like, but God told me. And then what is the person going to say? Well, no, God didn't
God
tell you.
doesn't
Like,
like
God
you.
told me
Yeah.
something else. Like, so I don't know which God you're talking to do because God told me this. Like, we like to spiritually scapegoat. It's really easy. You can say, I prayed about this and process it along a lot. And this is where I feel like my heart is leading me, especially in a breakup. But in the early parts of the relationship, like, oh my gosh, on a second, third date, please do not say, God told me we're supposed to be together. That feels really spiritually manipulative. And
Yeah.
people think it's like very intentional. And, there's a lot of things there. But I would say don't do that. Like, but if you're
Mm.
trying to bring the relationship in the beginning stages from just dating into like serious relationship, you can say, here's what I've been praying about. Here's where I feel like God is leading me. And I'd be curious to hear where God is leading you. I want to
Yeah.
open up this discussion together. That's a
Right.
beautiful way to bring God into it without saying, God told me you're my future wife.
Right. And you're like, well, I didn't have that happen in my
Yeah,
quiet time
exactly.
this morning, but
Yeah.
that sounds interesting.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Well, and I just want to talk real quick because we've talked about different stories and different backgrounds. And I think one of the neatest things about scripture is that regardless of our story or our background or upbringing or what we have or haven't experienced, scripture applies to all of us.
Yeah.
And that's what's really nice. One of the things is knowing that even though your story is different from mine and maybe journeys look different, scripture and God remains the same. And
Yeah.
so, just with that in mind, with that encouragement, of course, there's so much scripture about dating. We're supposed to flee sexual immorality, we're not supposed to be yoked together with unbelievers. But God tells us there's a purpose for us, and that doesn't depend on if we're married or if we're single. There is a plan. So, what would you say, just in closing, to people, we know that really want to be married. They want to be dating. They know the verses. They know God has a plan. They quote Jeremiah 29:11 all the time. But really, what can you say to encourage people that want that in their lives?
Well, I first want to say it's a beautiful desire. And so don't allow shame to take away from the beauty of the desire for relationship and marriage. I believe God wired us for relationship. And, if He didn't, then we'd all just be humans on our own islands just worshiping God. Like, why would we be created in community otherwise? He loves relationships, He has a heart for relationships. So don't allow yourself or any fight against that shame of your desire. And within that, there's a balance of not idolizing your desire and not believing, well, I have been this perfect Christian. And so I deserve this, God. I see so many women, especially later in life, as you get older or as you see other people getting married, you're like, but I'm doing all the things, God, and I'm doing this. And why isn't it happening for me? And that's the wrong heart position. When it says, God will give us the desires of our heart, it has to be that we are first putting God there first. Like if our desire is an idol, He's not going to be like, well, here's your desire. I'm going to grant it for you. Like He wants us to put Him in that position first, to be seeking after Him. And so your desire is beautiful, your desire is good. But if you are idolizing it in any such a way that you are feeling entitled to it, that you feel so lost if you don't get it, then you need to do some heart work to say, how do I find my freedom and my confidence and my excitement in my single life? How do I gain that back? Because there's nothing wrong with you as a single. There is actually so much beauty to you as a single, and we didn't see that exemplified that much in the Bible until we saw the life of Jesus, who was a single person. He was the first person really who showed us, wow, you can do amazing, beautiful things and not be married. And so there's
And
a
in just
beauty.
3 years.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Beautiful parts of being a single person. Then, of course, we see it with Paul as well, who talks a lot about singleness. But I would say reclaim it for yourself. If you have any sort of resentment towards God, if you're starting to feel and go into a scarcity mentality of like, He's never going to provide for me, everyone else gets it, I'm just stuck here. We need to redo those mindsets, and you need to come back to the truth of who God is, which is that He is abundant God. He wants to give you those desires of your heart, but He wants to be your prized possession. He wants to be the thing that you are most focused on. So continue to run after Him. And I'm not saying this as a person who's like been married happily all my life. Okay. Like truly, I know it's a struggle. I know it's hard. But the more that you feel stuck in your singleness, feeling entitled, or feeling like you're living in scarcity, that you're never going to find someone, the more that you're actually not going to get out of that place, the more you will
Mm,
stay stuck. And so I like to empower people to say, you have the keys to get unstuck. You need to press further into God. You need to renew your mind and know that God is an abundant God. Your desires are beautiful. But if you can find yourself living in this beautiful, thriving, purposed single life, if you can find yourself on that journey and feel content truly with where you are, I would truly believe that's when something's going to happen potentially.
mhm.
And so that's what you need to focus on. Your desire is beautiful. but run after God and find an amazing purpose in your single life.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Our big story was more with trying to get pregnant, and just we had a lot of losses, and we had the triplets and got pregnant and almost lost them, and it was a very difficult road, which
Mhm.
ended up amazing. But I just remember coming across the verse in Psalm about pouring out your heart to God.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's just, I mean, that's the best scripture, I think, whenever we're
Mhm.
going through our hard time, is just realizing, I mean, we can tell him anything
Yes.
and we can
Yes.
ask for anything, and just
Mhm.
realizing, I mean, he cares. He knows
Yeah.
that it's hard to be lonely. We know, especially during the pandemic, it's been very hard for people that are single, but that
Mhm.
no
Mhm.
one is going to care about you, of course, more than God. And we can tell
Yeah.
him anything, and he
Yeah.
understands. But I love your ministry. I love what you're doing, and we could do 3 shows on this. So I just want you to tell us, how can we stay connected? How can we know more? I do want to do a little plug for you. You did a wonderful series looking at LGBTQ relationships and what conversations look like around that in the church, and how we can be just Jesus to our friends who are
Mhm.
struggling in that area. And so I want you to tell us how to stay connected to you, and then also how to specifically find that series.
Yeah. Would love to connect with you guys. My ministry is really about community. I love sharing great advice and helping you guys in your singleness. And yet I love connecting people who feel like they don't have anybody else in their shoes. So you can come to heartofdating.com, where you are going to find our podcast, how to be involved in our thousands of singles who are in our Facebook group. You can find us on Instagram, Kateness and Heart of Dating. We have a dating program called Drop the Hanky. I should have mentioned this earlier when we were talking about breakups, but I have a book called Thank You for Rejecting Me, which is all about rejection. And I think it's a great book to do if you are single, especially. If you're dating, you could still read it, of course, but it's a fabulous book to do right now to help you through the things we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation. And then for the LGBTQ plus and the church community series, this was a series we did in the summer of 2021. You can find it on the podcast on Apple, Spotify. I think there's about 8 episodes in the series where we cover what it's like to have same-sex attraction. And we go through, I have so many different people I interviewed, from experts to mostly people who have walked this journey out. And it's a phenomenal series. I know I'm biased, but I really think they were conversations that we need to have that we don't talk about very often. We also talk about the transgender conversation, which is very complex and nuanced. And so if you are curious about that at all, highly recommend you go listen to that series on the podcast.
That's great. Thank you so much, Kate. Thank you for being here. You're coming back on because we have so much
Okay,
more to talk about.
I'm
But this
excited.
this is it for today. So y'all make sure to check out Kate's ministry and share this episode with your single friends or with people who are going through a breakup. And we will catch you next week. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Unapologetic. Remember, you can catch today's episode and more at ptv.org/Julia.